I was hired at a secret monster hospital. The rules are terrifying. The first night, the job listing was simple, almost too simple. Night shift nurse needed. No prior experience required. Must follow rules. $10,000 per week. I should have known something was wrong. But the promise of money that could change my life made it impossible to ignore. My student loans, my mother's medical bills, my crumbling apartment. It all seemed fixable with just a few months of this work. So I applied. And to my surprise, I got the job immediately. No interview, no questions, just a location and a time. St. Althea's Medical Facility, 11:45 p.m. The hospital wasn't listed on any map. It sat deep in the woods, its towering structure barely visible through the thick mist that clung to the trees. The building looked ancient, the bricks darkened by time, the windows stained and warped. A single, flickering neon sign buzzed above the entrance. St. Althea's. We care for all. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing down the empty, white-tiled hallway. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, mixed with something pungent, something organic and rotting. A woman in a crisp, white uniform greeted me at the front desk. She was older, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her face void of emotion. Her name tag read, Matron Evelyn. "You're late," she said, sliding a clipboard toward me. I'm sorry. There was fog, and I got a little turned around. I stammered. She didn't respond. Instead, she gestured at the clipboard. "Read the rules." Sign at the bottom. Failure to comply results in immediate termination. The rules were typed in bold, black ink. My stomach twisted as I read them. Rules for night shift staff. Number 1. Do not speak unless spoken to. Some patients react badly to unnecessary noise. Number 2. Do not remove your ID badge. It confirms your identity. Number 3. If a patient has black eyes, avoid direct eye contact. Number 4. Never open room 311. Ever. Number 5. If you hear a lullaby humming through the intercom, immediately hide under the nearest bed and do not move until it stops. Number 6. If a doctor asks you to assist in surgery, confirm their name first. If they hesitate, run. Number 7. If a patient is standing outside your station at exactly 3:14 a.m., do not acknowledge them. Close your eyes until they leave. Number 8. The morgue is not empty. Do not enter alone. I laughed nervously. This is a joke, right? Matron Evelyn didn't blink. Signed the form, Miss Carter. My hand shook as I signed my name. Anna Carter. The moment the pen left the paper, Matron Evelyn snatched it away. Your shift starts now. Room 217 needs a sedative. Be quick. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her shoes clicking against the floor. I swallowed hard, clutching my ID badge. This was insane, but $10,000 a week. I had at least make it through one night. Room 217. The halls were eerily silent as I made my way to room 217. The overhead lights buzzed, casting a sickly yellow glow. The scent of antiseptic was stronger here, mingling with something metallic. Blood. I reached the door. My fingers trembled as I pushed it open. The patient inside was wrong. His skin was stretched too tight over his bones, his eyes sunken, his lips cracked and dry. He was strapped to the bed, his limbs twitching against the restraints. His chest rose and fell in rapid, uneven bursts. As I stepped closer, his eyes snapped open. They were black. My heart pounded. Rule number 3. Avoid direct eye contact. I quickly looked down, fumbling with the sedative. The patient started whispering, low, raspy words I couldn't understand. The sound made my skin crawl. My hands were slick with sweat as I injected the sedative into his fore. The whispers stopped. I risked a glance. The patient was still staring at me, but now his lips curled into a slow, unnatural smile. "You shouldn't be here, Anna," he rasped. The breath left my lungs. "How do you know my name?" The patient's grin widened. "You'll see." The monitor beside him flatlined. I stumbled backward. Oh God! The door behind me slammed open. A doctor in a bloodstained lab coat strode in. His ID badge read Dr. Langston. His sharp eyes flicked to me, then to the patient. "Out. Now." I didn't argue. I fled into the hall, my pulse hammering. The lullaby. I was barely 10 steps away when the hospital intercom crackled to life. A soft, eerie lullaby drifted through the speakers. Rule number 5. If you hear a lullaby, hide under the nearest bed. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I dropped to the floor and rolled beneath a nearby hospital bed, pressing my hand over my mouth. The song was getting louder. A shadow moved past the door. It wasn't human. Its legs were too long, its arms dragging against the floor. Its fingers twitched, sharp nails tapping the tile. The thing hummed along with a lullaby in a voice that didn't belong to this world. It stopped in front of the bed. I held my breath. A clawed hand reached down, brushing against the floor inches from my face. Then, silence. The lullaby stopped. The intercom crackled again, followed by Matron Evelyn's voice. "All clear. Resume duties." I stayed there for a full minute, my body frozen in terror. When I finally crawled out, the hallway was empty. But on the floor, where the thing had been standing, was a single piece of paper. I picked it up with shaking hands. Scrawled in jagged, ink-black letters were 4 words. "Don't trust the doctors." The things beneath. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the cryptic note. "Don't trust the doctors." My heart pounded as my mind raced. Who had left this? And why? The hospital rules already made me uneasy. But this was something worse. Something personal. A slow chill crept down my spine as I thought of Dr. Langston. The way he had dismissed me from room 217 so quickly, as if I had walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see. I needed answers. Clutching the note, I made my way back toward the nurse's station. The halls felt darker now, the buzzing lights flickering overhead. The hospital felt wrong, like the building itself was breathing. As I turned a corner, a sound stopped me cold. A soft scraping noise, like nails dragging across tile. It was coming from behind me. Slowly, I turned my head. At the end of the hallway, something crouched just outside the reach of the dim lights. Its body was elongated, thin and twisted, its skin pale and stretched tight like wax paper. It had no eyes, just 2 deep, gaping holes where they should have been. The creature tilted its head, its jagged mouth opening too wide as it inhaled deeply. It was sniffing me. My blood ran cold. I had to move. Now. I turned and ran, my shoes slamming against the tile as I sprinted toward the nurse's station. My ID badge bounced against my chest, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. The scraping sound grew louder behind me. It was fast. I rounded a corner and nearly slammed into Matron Evelyn. Her cold, expressionless eyes locked onto mine. "Why are you running, Miss Carter?" I glanced back. The hallway was empty. No sign of the creature. No dragging nails. No hollowed-out eyes watching me from the dark. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. I thought I saw something. Matron Evelyn studied me for a long moment. Then, she simply said, "Get back to work." I wanted to protest, to demand answers, but the way she looked at me, like I was something insignificant, something replaceable, made my skin crawl. I nodded and walked away, but inside, I knew something for certain. This hospital was hiding something, and I wasn't the only one who knew it. Room 311. I spent the next hour trying to steady my nerves, forcing myself into the motions of normalcy. I delivered medications, checked vital signs, anything to distract myself. But the rules kept circling in my mind. Rule number 4. Never open room 311. Ever. Something about that rule gnawed at me. Why? What was inside? I wasn't sure if it was curiosity or something deeper, something primal, but I found myself standing in front of room 311. The door was unlike the others. While most hospital doors were standard wood or glass, this one was reinforced metal, with heavy bolts sealing the edges. No window, no nameplate, just 311. I pressed my ear against the cold metal. Silence. Then, faintly, something scratched from the other side. I jerked back, my heart hammering. You shouldn't be here. I whirled around. Dr. Langston stood behind me, his face unreadable. I swallowed. I was just... You were just about to break the most important rule in this hospital, he interrupted, his voice eerily calm. His eyes flicked to my ID badge. Miss Carter, if you value your life, you'll stay away from this door. His hand gripped my wrist, too tightly, like he was checking for something. My pulse pounded beneath his fingers. Then, just as quickly, he let go. Go back to your rounds. I didn't argue. I turned and walked away, my mind swirling with questions. But as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in room 311 knew I was there. 3:14 a.m. By the time I reached the nurse's station again, my shift was nearly over. Just another 2 hours. I told myself I could make it. Then, the clock struck 3:14 a.m. My stomach dropped. Rule number 7. If a patient is standing outside your station at exactly 3:14 a.m., do not acknowledge them. Close your eyes until they leave. The air grew thick, heavy. I felt it before I saw it. A figure stood at the edge of the station, just within my peripheral vision. I knew it wasn't a normal patient. It didn't breathe. It didn't shift. It just stood there, waiting. I squeezed my eyes shut, my hands gripping the counter. Seconds passed, then a minute, then a voice. It was a soft, broken whisper. Please help me. A surge of ice crawled up my spine. I bit my tongue, forcing myself to stay silent. The whisper grew desperate. Please. It hurts. Something lightly touched my shoulder. I nearly screamed. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the presence was gone. I opened my eyes. The station was empty. The clock now read 3:15 a.m. A shaky breath escaped me, my body trembling. I had followed the rule, but the worst part, I had recognized that voice. It was the patient from room 217, the one who had flatlined hours ago. The morgue. By the time my shift ended, I felt like a hollowed-out version of myself. I changed out of my uniform in the staff room, trying not to look at my reflection in the cracked mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark and sunken. As I grabbed my bag, I noticed something on the table. A manila folder. My name was written on the front in red ink. My stomach twisted. I slowly opened it. Inside was a medical report. Patient name, Anna Carter. Status, admitted. Room, pending. My breath hitched. I wasn't a nurse. I was a patient. The air in the room grew cold. Behind me, a voice spoke. Time for your transfer. I turned. Dr. Langston stood in the doorway, but his eyes were completely black. The transfer. Dr. Langston's black eyes bore into me, his expression unreadable. I couldn't breathe. The words on the medical report burned into my mind. Patient name, Anna Carter. Status, admitted. Room, pending. I took a shaky step back, my pulse hammering. This has to be a mistake. I'm not a patient. I was hired as a nurse. Dr. Langston tilted his head slightly. Then, In a voice as smooth as glass, he said, "Who told you that?" The question struck me like a physical blow. My memory flashed back, finding the job listing, getting hired on the spot, arriving at the hospital. No interview, no paperwork, just the rules. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. Had I ever been hired? Langston took a step forward. "Come now, Anna. You've seen too much. It's time for your transfer." I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. My sneakers skidded across the white tile as I rounded a corner. The overhead lights flickered wildly, casting shifting shadows along the hallway walls. Somewhere behind me, Dr. Langston's voice echoed, "There is no leaving, Anna. You belong to us now." The hospital felt different. Wrong. The halls stretched longer than they should. Doors that had once led to patient rooms were now cold, black voids. I turned another corner and nearly slammed into a gurney covered in a blood-stained sheet. The sheet twitched. Something underneath it moved. A raspy breath hissed from beneath the fabric, and then the sheet lifted. A figure sat up. It was me. My own face stared back at me, but it wasn't right. Her eyes were hollowed-out pits. Her skin stretched too tight over sharp bones. Her lips curled into an unnatural, jagged grin. "Run all you want," the copy whispered in my own voice. "You were always meant to be here." I stumbled back, my head spinning. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the thing wearing my face reached out, its bony fingers stretching toward me. I bolted. I tore through the halls, ignoring the way they seemed to shift and change around me. This place wasn't a hospital. It was something else, something alive. I needed to find a way out. And deep down, I knew the only place I'd find answers. Room 311, the door that should never open. I reached the heavy metal door, my breath ragged. My hands trembled as I gripped the cold handle. The rules screamed in my head. Never open room 311. Ever. But the note whispered back, "Don't trust the doctors." I had to know. With one last deep breath, I turned the handle. The door unlocked. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. It was cold, far colder than it should have been. The room wasn't like the others. No hospital beds, no machines, just walls covered in photographs. My stomach lurched. The photos were all of me. Every stage of my life. Childhood, high school, college. Some photos I recognized. Others I had never seen before. And then, at the very center of the wall, a photograph of me in this hospital. My mouth went dry. In the photo, I was wearing this uniform, holding this ID badge. But my eyes were black. Behind me, something clicked. I turned. A figure stood in the corner of the room, shrouded in darkness. "Do you understand now?" The voice rasped. I couldn't speak. The figure stepped forward into the dim light. My blood turned to ice. It was Matron Evelyn, but she wasn't human. Her skin was porcelain white, cracked like old ceramic. Black veins ran beneath the surface, and when she opened her mouth, her teeth were needle sharp. "You were never meant to leave, Anna," she said, her voice hollow. "You've been here before. You just don't remember." I shook my head. "That's not true. I applied for the job. I read the rules." Matron Evelyn let out a slow, eerie chuckle. "The rules weren't meant to keep you safe. They were meant to keep you controlled." She gestured to the walls. "This is not your first shift, and it won't be your last." My body trembled. She took another step closer. "You belong to this hospital, just like the others before you, just like the ones still trapped here." "No," I whispered. I turned to run, and slammed into Dr. Langston. His black eyes stared into mine. "You should have followed the rules, Anna," he murmured. Then, everything went black. The ones who never left. Darkness swallowed me whole. I was falling, not in the normal sense, not through space or gravity, but through something deeper. I tried to scream, but no sound left my lips. My body felt weightless, untethered, as though I no longer belonged to myself. Then, impact. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocking from my lungs. For a long moment, I lay there, my head spinning. The cold tile beneath me was slick, wet with something thick and sticky. Blood. I gasped, scrambling to my feet. I was back in hospital, but it wasn't the same. The hallways stretched unnaturally long, the fluorescent lights above flickering in erratic bursts. The walls breathed, expanding and contracting like the lungs of a living thing. Something had changed. St. Althea's was no longer pretending to be a hospital. It was revealing what it truly was. And I was trapped inside it, the ward of the forgotten. I stumbled forward, my legs shaky beneath me. The corridor was lined with doors. Not normal hospital doors, but massive, rusted slabs of metal, each one bearing deep claw marks. Each door had a name scratched into it. My fingers brushed across the nearest one. Nurse Abigail Reeves, admitted in 1974. I swallowed hard and moved to the next. Dr. Malcolm Hayes, admitted in 1961. Then another. Orderly Samuel Black, admitted in 1989. Dozens of names, stretching down the length of the hall. Every staff member who had worked here. They had never left. My pulse hammered as I continued forward, my mind racing. I had to get out. Now, a familiar voice. A soft sobbing echoed from further down the hall. My breath hitched. I turned the corner and saw her. A nurse, sitting on the floor, her back pressed against the wall. Her uniform was stained, tattered, old. She looked up, her bloodshot eyes locking onto mine. My stomach dropped. I had seen her before. A photograph. One of the pictures on the wall in room 311. Her lips trembled. You shouldn't be here. My throat was dry. Who are you? Her breath came in shallow gasps. I was like you. A nurse. New hire. They told me the same things. Follow the rules. Do your rounds. Don't ask questions. She let out a strangled laugh. But the rules aren't meant to protect us. They're meant to keep us in line. Because once you step foot in this hospital, you're already dead. I shook my head. No, that's not true. I can still get out. Her expression twisted into something pitying. You really think so? A slow, sickening smile spread across her face. And then, her skin split open. Her body convulsed, her limbs stretching, her eyes sinking deep into her skull. She was changing. Her bones snapped as her mouth stretched wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. And then, in a voice that was no longer human, she rasped, "Run, the ones in the walls." I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran. The hallway shifted around me, doors disappearing, walls folding into endless corridors. The building itself was trying to keep me here. From behind me, the sound of skittering feet erupted. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The thing that had once been a nurse was coming after me, moving too fast, its fingers scraping against the tile. A door loomed ahead. The morgue. I didn't think. I just threw myself inside and slammed it shut behind me. The air was frigid. The scent of bleach and decay burned my nostrils. Rows of metal drawers lined the walls, body storage. Something shifted behind me. I turned and saw them. The corpses were standing. One by one, the body drawers slid open, revealing patients, nurses, doctors. Their dead, rotting faces turned toward me, their empty eye sockets watching. They spoke in unison. "Join us." A cold hand clamped down on my wrist. I screamed. The truth about St. Althea's. Light exploded around me. And suddenly, I wasn't in the morgue anymore. I was in a surgical room, strapped to an operating table. Dr. Langston loomed over me, his black eyes filled with something ancient. "You should have followed the rules, Anna," he murmured. My heart pounded. "Let me go." He tilted his head. "You still don't understand, do you?" He gestured to the wall. I turned my head, and my blood ran cold. A massive mirror stood beside me, reflecting the room. But the person strapped to the table wasn't me. It was something else, something monstrous. Its body was elongated, its skin stitched together in unnatural ways. Its face, my face, was stretched, its mouth split open into something inhuman. Terror gripped me. "That's not me. That's not." Langston leaned in close, whispering in my ear, "You were never human to begin with." The realization crashed into me like a wave of ice. Memories flooded back, flashes of dark rooms, surgical tools, whispered voices. I hadn't been hired. I had been created. St. Althea's wasn't a hospital. It was a laboratory, and I was just one of their many failed experiments. Langston smiled. "But don't worry. This time, we'll get it right." He raised a scalpel. I screamed. "The last patient." I screamed as the scalpel descended. At the last second, I wrenched my arm free, twisting my body violently. The restraints dug into my skin, but I ignored the pain, fueled by sheer terror. Dr. Langston's expression remained eerily calm, as if he had seen this all before. "Anna," he murmured, "there's nowhere to run." I didn't listen. With a desperate jerk, I broke free from the final strap and threw myself off the operating table. The room shifted. The white surgical walls melted into dark, pulsing veins. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, tendrils of fleshy sinew twisting like they were alive. The hospital wasn't a building. It was a living thing, and I was inside it, the truth beneath the skin. My feet hit the ground, and I bolted. Langston's voice echoed behind me. "You can't escape yourself, Anna." I didn't look back. I tore through the halls, the walls breathing like lungs, the floor rippling beneath my feet. The fluorescent lights overhead pulsed in time with a slow, sickening heartbeat. Somewhere deep in my chest, I knew St. Althea's was alive. It had always been alive, and I had always been a part of it. I wasn't real. The room that shouldn't exist. I stumbled into a familiar hallway. The doors were gone. The names were gone. And, at the very end, a single door remained. Patient 0 was engraved on its surface. The moment I saw it, something inside me shifted. This was the answer. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle. The second my fingers touched the metal, an explosion of memories ripped through me. The monster in the mirror. Flashes. A surgical table. Dozens of doctors, their faces blank, their eyes black. A body, my body, floating in a tank, stitched together from something other. Voices whispering in a language I didn't understand. And then, a mirror. My reflection. But it wasn't human. A twisted, patchwork creation, held together by surgical sutures and unholy science. Eyes that weren't my own. Skin that belonged to something else. St. Althea's had created me, not as a nurse, but as an experiment, a creature, a failed prototype, and now they were trying to bring me back. The final choice. I staggered backward. My whole body itched, burned. The door to patient 0 swung open. Inside was a surgical pod, filled with liquid, waiting for me. Langston's voice murmured in my mind. "You were never meant to leave, Anna." I felt something inside me waking up. A hunger. A knowledge. I wasn't human. I had never been human. And if I stayed here, if I let them put me back in that pod, I never would be. I had two choices. 1. Step into the pod. Become what I was meant to be. Let St. Althea's take me back. 2. Burn it all down. My hand tightened around the scalpel. I chose the second. The fire that shouldn't burn. I ran. through the halls, past the walls that screamed, through corridors that twisted and pulsed. My body was changing. My veins burned. My skin itched. The monster inside me was trying to take over. I reached the boiler room. Rows of gas pipes. An emergency oxygen tank. A single red valve. I wrenched it open. The smell of gasoline filled the air. Behind me, the hospital roared. The walls split apart, revealing teeth, eyes, flesh. I grabbed a scalpel, my only weapon, and slammed it against the steel, creating a spark. The end of St. Altheus. Fire erupted. The world ignited. Flames raced through the halls, consuming everything. The walls, the floors, the living veins of the hospital itself. I ran, my body melting, shifting, changing. As I reached the exit, I caught one last glimpse of Dr. Langston, standing in the inferno, smiling. And then, darkness. The aftermath. I woke up on the side of a road. The night sky stretched above me, empty and cold. The hospital was gone. No ruins, no ashes, just an empty field, like it had never existed. I looked down at my hands. Human hands. My reflection stared back at me from a nearby puddle. Normal. But deep in my chest, I could feel it. A faint heartbeat. Something not quite right. St. Althea's was gone. But I wasn't sure if it had truly let me go. Or if I had brought a part of it with me. The final rule. Weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. No sender. Just a single piece of paper inside. It had one rule written on it. Do not return to St. Althea's. I swallowed hard, because deep down, I knew the truth. It was only a matter of time before it found me again. The end.